Hi, everybody. Here we are with our podcast number 2 of 4FS Women Talking, which is the title I came up with. I don't think it necessarily is super creative. There's 4 of us here. Myself, I am Susie Church Brown, and we have Hillery Midkiff, we have Lisa Tilstra, Morgan Loosely, and we are going to talk today about employment overseas. Part EFM employment, part women employment, part we have a contract employee as well. And so we're just going to talk about just what employment looks like overseas. Ladies, how are you today?
Very well.
Great. Great. Thanks for having us.
So we're gonna start off with a doozy of a question. We're gonna talk about the worst interview experience. And we're not talking like, high school, I'm sitting in Skippers and I'm having like, the 50-year-old manager interview me. I'm talking like overseas interview experience. So I will tell you my worst experience. Well, I've had several, but I still remember I was interviewing for an incredibly low job, one that I had already previously at another post worked the 2 levels above the supervisory job. But because of my husband's position, all of the whole nepotism ugliness and the questions that can be asked around nepotism were rearing their ugly heads. And so I had a 20-person panel interviewing me for this low-paying job, 5 of whom were from DC because they were a visiting team and they thought that would be an appropriate use of their time. And yeah, I mean, I got the job because I was qualified, but it was an unbelievable experience. And then they still did a nepotism review cable that went to the entire mission and displayed all of the questions that they had about my credentials. So that's my nightmare story.
That's impressive.
Who can top that one?
I cannot. I'm like, wow. The most I've ever interviewed in front of was 10. You've doubled it.
They shared it with the whole mission? That's ridiculous.
The whole mission. Yep.
Well, I mean, it felt awful. It didn't end up awful because I'm here. But when I interviewed for this position, I took a really early time slot given the Sri Lanka and Bogota time difference. I decided to do the interview at the embassy before everyone was there because it had the most stable internet connection. And I had all my questions printed out. I had my resume printed out. Everything was on my desk. And on the way to the embassy, my phone rings and it's the Sri Lanka mission for the interview. They called 30 minutes ahead of time and I was in the backseat of a taxi. And I am trying not to look frazzled, and I'm trying to, and I told them, I'm like, I think they're on my calendar. It's showing 30 minutes from now, which is like 7 a.m. This was like 6:30 when they called, and so, and they're like, oh, we really need to do it now. Is this okay? And I was like, yeah, sure. Give me 1 second. So I'm talking to the cab driver in Spanish, and he agrees to pull over to the side of the highway so I can do my interview for the position. And I do it. I knock it out of the park. To be honest, it was a great interview. And the last question was, how do you react in an unexpected situation with high stress? And I just looked at them. I was like, oh, you mean like this one right here? And they all busted up laughing. I get here though, and I find out they thought it was a gimmick. They thought I did this to get the job. They thought I had this whole cab thing staged and that it was what made me memorable. And I was just like, man, you can't win. You can't win. I was so it was both the worst and the best interview process.
Aw, it's that crazy 30-minute difference of India Standard Time.
Yeah.
Wow, nice job.
Well done.
Morgan, I think you would have gotten it no matter what, Hillary. who could pass on such a great employee? They'd be crazy.
Never know. We'll never know.
I don't have one that comes to mind. But maybe I black out if things go poorly and then I don't remember. or I think now, basically, since I was an adult, like I don't interview unless I like really either want the job or I've really not interviewed for that many embassy jobs, which are the horror stories I hear. Like yours, Susie. Like it's I try to stay away from that scene. But I do actually have a job now at an embassy, so I have successfully run that gauntlet once.
Twice.
I mean, right, I did get offered the job and then they took it back. So whether or not that was later, they were like, oh, oops. But you're right, twice.
And Lisa, any nightmare stories?
I would say my nightmare story is not a direct interview. In a way, it's a lack of an interview. I applied for this really unique position that was an EFM position. They had just created it, and was told, yes, you have come to the training, and it was done sort of backwards where you attended the training first before getting hired. Long story. And then, so I was told, yep, you're in. Training starts next week. And then on, I don't know, Monday or the week before, I get an email saying, oh, sorry, no thanks, we don't want you. And I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened? Like, I got all the information to come. And this is where I'm really proud of myself, because I called the woman who was in charge of this and I just said, hey, I got this notice and I'd love to know what would make me more eligible for a position like this in the future, because it's something I would really enjoy doing. And she acted kind of surprised and she's like, wait a minute, what's going on? And then she ended up talking to a bunch of people, and there was a lot of behind the scenes things happening that I had no idea about at the time. I ended up being invited again to the training, and it's over the long term turned into a nice part-time job. And my takeaway of always ask why. If you really care about the position and it's something you would have really enjoyed and you didn't get it, reach out, ask why, learn from it. And in my case, I mean, it doesn't always happen this way, but I'm so glad I did, because I was tempted just to be really sad and disappointed and go on with my life. And if I hadn't have made that call, my life would be very different and my career would be very different. So yeah.
And that's a really hard call to make.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember sort of like where I was, and like that internal shaking you have where you're just like, I remember being extremely nervous about it. And again, like really proud of myself for making the call.
I had, I'll tell a story about similar to that, where I thought, no, I don't need to like difficult. And then I was difficult and then it paid off. Thank you for those examples. And not because we want to, revel in everyone's nightmare situations, but just so people know, like, it's actually more normal to have a really bad interview than it is to have like that throw it out of the park sort of a thing. Oh, Morgan's raising her hand.
I thought of one.
Oh, excellent.
Yes. So when my husband was trying to get into the Foreign Service, I also quite stupidly was trying to get into the Foreign Service. And we both ended up at the oral, was in the olden times where you went to an oral interview, and we were both in it. And so we were like in different groups, and he'd already done it. Anyway, whatever. We were in these different groups, and they do like a group exercise and then a personal interview where it's just one-on-one. And like he'd gone into something, and the people, they all came out of their thing and they were like, oh, he did so well. And we were young and childless and optimistic and eager about the world. And I was like, oh, okay, like, wouldn't it be great if we both got these jobs? And like, so anyway, then I go into my one-on-one interview part, and they're just like, so what would make you good? And I was kind of like, I like honestly don't know anything about this job. Like we'd just done the memo writing exercise, and I was like I cannot even imagine finding this interesting. Like everything about it, I was just like, this is probably not good. But of course, I didn't want to fail. Like I was like, I still want them to want me, even though I'm like really finding this challenging. And so I'm in this one-on-one interview, and they're just like, okay, like we'll call you. And anyway, and so I leave, and I'm like, okay, like you're stressed in those things. And anyway, I leave, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna like go refresh. So I like run to the restroom, and I get there, and I realize my fly has been down the whole time. And I don't know if somebody noticed, but I was like, that's like anyway, I got a rejection letter pretty quickly after that. And that is actually the worst interview I've ever had. But it was like, it kind of felt like the universe being like, this isn't for you.
I love that story. Can I also comment back on that, Morgan? Because I often, when I'm talking to people who are preparing for interviews, one of the things I often tell people, and I remind myself, an interview is a two-way interview. I'm not just being interviewed as a candidate, I'm also interviewing the potential employer. And I love that you were in that process and you were thinking, I find this extremely boring. I don't know if this is the right job for me. And to me, that really helps me have a different mindset going into an interview where I don't feel like all the spotlight's on me. It's also, I want to learn about the organization and the position. Is it going to be something that I'm interested in? And it feels a little bit more empowering to have that approach.
I was coaching someone on an interview that they had today. So we were talking yesterday, and she was like, what do I do if I get flustered? What do I do if they ask this question? And all I could think about was the book we read, Unbound. And I was like, I don't just ask them a question back. And she's like, really, Hillary, how's that going to go? Why do you want to apply for this job? What question am I supposed to ask them? I'd be like, well, why wouldn't I want to work for you? I'm like, I don't know, come up with your name. And then I was like, compliment their tie and ask them where they bought it. I don't know. Buy yourself some time, redirect the communication flow, and then take it from there. If anything, people will giggle a little bit and you'll lighten the atmosphere and it'll be fine. And I meant to ask her how that went today. I don't know if she was able to use a question or not. But I think you're right. I always really fail at that part. And I'm always really impressed with people in interviews who come with smart questions about the organization or their role or the company, who've clearly done their homework and know more than what's written in the job description. I got here and I didn't even know the mission director's name. After I arrived, I didn't even know the budget, the annual budget. There's so many things I could have asked, so many things I could have been like up to speed on. And I was like, nah, I'm just going to wing it. It'll be fine.
That's awesome.
Well, in fairness for you, Hillary, like it's a weird dynamic in aid with the mission director, and you sit in Sri Lanka, but you work in Maldives and that whole thing.
I'm sorry, I knew who the mission director was. I did not know who Alana Teplitz was when she cold called me on my first day in quarantine. Upon arrival, which apparently was her calling card. She cold called everyone upon arrival to say hello. I'm Elena, and I'm like, great. I'm Hillary. I'm Elena Teplitz, the ambassador to the mission. I'm like, I ran away. I think I dropped the phone and ran away from it, thinking she could see me. I don't know what I did. It was just like, well, that didn't go well.
No, you need to do like the power. Like, is it okay if I call you Lena? Like you just immediately give them a nickname.
Yes. I love it.
See, you could always make that one work for you as well.
Yeah.
So, ladies, why do we feel like we need to work? Don't we have enough going on at home?
I like to work to avoid all the things I have going on. Is that not everyone else's reason for working? I don't know. Okay. All right. Just me.
There's a little bit of relief when you walk into the office on Monday and it's like, okay, I can deal with this drama. This drama I can deal with. And I have boys. Like,
They still have drama.
I think it's
Some, not
so
yours specifically, boys in general. Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
no. I think it's so important to maintain my own sense of purpose and mission in the world. Being a spouse in the Foreign Service is unique because we're so wrapped in, and I hate the word dependent, but it's, I mean, it's even like written in the back of my diplomatic passport. Lisa is a dependent of John Tilstra. And so for me, it's been really important to maintain my own just sense of who I am, what I have to offer to the world, what is my purpose, and also it's lovely when I can contribute financially to our joint goals and things like that. And yet also often for me, the finances haven't been the main driver. Like it's not like, oh, we need the money, so I have to get a job, which I feel really grateful for. And also I know, like, because I've had my own business and it took time to grow, it was really hard for those years where I was not making much money at all. And I feel a great sense of gratitude and relief now that at this point in my journey and career, I am making enough money to feel like, oh, this is a significant contribution to our financial goals. So, yeah, but for me, it's just like this sense of purpose, and I am an individual. I'm not just this dependent blob that comes along with my spouse on this journey.
That is one of the most frustrating parts about being a trailing spouse, or whatever it is we're called these days, and because we're not like our own person. And I find, and I have been fortunate or unfortunate, as however you want to look at it, to have a job in the embassy every mission we've been at, and every single one of them, well, who is your spouse? It's like, well, I am me first. And, you know, then of course there's not that many people with the same last name, oddly enough, because it's not super uncommon. But it does get really tiresome to be someone else's dependent rather than your own person. Before marriage, before foreign service, like I was my own self and I had earned it, and I got to where I was because I had worked hard and interviewed well. But yeah, it's kind of a different situation. That's why I like to work, that sense of purpose as well, and being able to contribute.
I agree. I found that my anger and frustration at being a blob attached to a person is like really tied to when we move. Like, so a lot of stuff coming up for me because we're going to move, where it's like my spouse is moving to a great next new job, and like everybody's eager for that, and he's got these qualifications and experience and blah blah blah, and I'm like, I spent 2 years getting good at a job here that will have zero meaning at my next post. And the only, I mean, probably in a very self-defeating way, I refuse to work at the embassy generally where we are, but here this was the only choice. And then in my next post, it will also be the only choice if I want to have paid work. And so anyway, I probably could have made us a lot more money if I just like not had this chip on my shoulder. Like, I refuse on principle. I'm not sure what the principle even is, but it has been interesting. And I found that like it has been valuable. And I do have that, like, I'm a separate person here instead of just this wife that happened to be able to have the luxury of coming along. And there's all kinds of cultural problems with the way I think we talk about EFMs, even if it's not intentional. I mean, like, some of it is inherent in there, but it's like it's way too easy to assume that identity first, not for EFMs, but everybody else. Like, oh, so who's your spouse? Or like that, those questions shouldn't be the first one. And EFMs, I think, could do a lot to not ask those, right? To like, as a group, really focus on who are the people. And I think it can depend on like how long you've been in the foreign service as a spouse, or if you've had embassy jobs, like that you can consciously change that behavior and really go out of your way to be like, tell me about yourself, and like not even ask who your spouse is. It really doesn't matter unless you think you know them. It
Right.
may not be relevant. Anyway, so I think that those, the question is actually, why do we work? And so for me, it was like, maybe I'll try it, because I had decided I would never. And I was like, maybe that was the wrong choice and I should like give it a shot and see if it's as bad as I always imagined it was. So, and there's money, which not all of my jobs have had. Like when I work on the local market in a place that is not a particularly high paying society, I'm like, I made $5 today, everybody. Like, anyway, it wasn't particularly profitable, but it was very rewarding.
And that's an interesting, I mean, there's a lot of connections there to other questions that I would love to have, but I would love to give Hillary, you are the direct hire, if we're going to be putting labels on people. So you work because it is what you love. And you've chosen this job because...
Oh, because lots and lots of reasons. Yeah, I really, really do love my job. I actively don't join the Foreign Service because I like the autonomy and the unique perspective and the unique types of jobs that you can get as a PSC versus something where you're coned and you're stuck in something. But I still love the framework of international international donors of the donor community of the UN. My big hairy audacious goal is to be Secretary General of the UN, and so every move I make in my career is towards that end goal. I mean, I'll probably end up as like the Assistant Secretary General, but like, you know, really close. Like I am shooting for the moon here.
I believe in you, Secretary, all the way.
And so for me, that's not my ikigai. That's not the purpose. That's not the reason I get up every morning, but it's the long-term goal. And the reason it's the goal is because I do like what underlies that. All of these agencies working towards a common good, being of service to people. And that guides all of my job choices. I'm looking potentially at some options in the future, and it might take me in more of a humanitarian aid direction, which is kind of the side of my portfolio that I would like to fill out some more, because that's not been somewhere where I've had what I think is adequate exposure to become the Secretary General. And so with that goal in mind, with this dream out there, I have a copy of the current Secretary General's resume, and I've gone through and like scratched out all the things that I've already checked the box on. This is actually something that they tell you to do. Like if you have a dream and you have a goal, find someone who's done it or gotten really close and see how they got there. What did they do? What challenges did they face? And then put yourself on a career path that matches that or will complement that. And Juan sometimes he's like, you know, you've taken these, like my bachelor's degree is in archaeology. I am a trained archaeologist. And so how did all of these things happen? And he's like, sometimes I have no idea. He's like, but clearly you're on the right path. Like everything lines up when you look at where you are now. But if you go back 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, you're like, no, none of this makes sense. But because the path is all zigzag and backwards and forwards. But and so that's, yeah, I mean, I've wanted that job for as long as I can remember. And so I think that's the driving force behind why I work, where I choose to work, and what I'm passionate about. And it's been a whole lot of luck to get me here. I accidentally landed a job at the UN and then just like took off from there. And and with a lot of support and a lot of help along the way. And so, but I think people are really inclined to help you and to support you when you have this this goal and this path, as zany as it might have been. It helps people to align with you and to back you up on that. So that's why I go to the office in the morning. And sometimes when I'm writing a briefing memo for a stupid event that I don't believe we should be participating in, that's eating up all of my time, and I have to tell people what they need to wear to the event, it's really hard for me to remember that this will somehow get me to the Secretary General position someday. But it's a combination of life skills that get you there.
Then somebody else will be telling you what to wear.
That's right.
Somebody better dress me, because I won't be able to. Be
We
like,
just
this is not a jeans and t-shirt event. I'm sorry, I must be in the wrong.
We just had a visitor to post who hit 2 other spots. And one of the categories you have to fill in is what they have to wear, which, is relevant when they're going to temples, et cetera, et cetera. And in the previous country that she was in, the attire category only listed sunglasses.
That's amazing.
Hey,
So I'm like,
people come to Maldives, I tell them to bring 3 pairs. You will lose one and you need 2 backup. You need a backup for your second pair. Like, that's it. It is
but
sunny.
shouldn't
It's fun.
she have been wearing something else besides
Big,
sunglasses?
No, protect your eyes, Susie. It's ice.
And sunblock, maybe, if you are not wearing anything else except for sunglasses. So Hillary's Hillary's comment kind of made me want to move to, how do you decide where to work? And Morgan, you kind of alluded to this with your $5 salary day. I remember the first time I interviewed overseas, and I had just come from a job in university, and I remember interviewing for 2 jobs, and I was offered both jobs on the same day. Long discussion with my husband, who, full disclosure, gave a finance discussion today. So he's all about the money and saving and investments and all that stuff. And so we decided that it would be a best decision to work at the embassy, TSP, blah, blah, blah. My other job that I was offered was at the overseas school teaching the math and science classes, which I kind of regret not taking that job, but I mean, it's best not to think about what if.
Yeah, you would have been great.
Probably.
But you're also great at your embassy job.
Yeah. So, I mean, you never really know, right? But what about you guys? How do you decide where to work? Lisa, you've not worked in the embassy per se. You worked for FSI in embassies, building the capacities of our local staff, so you know what's expected.
Yeah. It's my journey's been chaotic, and Hillary, I really relate to your zigging and zagging, and I have been in the community of the Foreign Service and overseas for about 12 years, now just landed back in the US. And it's interesting to look back, and when I tell people what I do now, people are just like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing, and you've been so successful, and blah, blah, blah. And what I want to say then, I try to just say, thank you. Yeah, I feel really grateful. But inside, what I want to say is the first 5 years were so hard. And I can remember, I can close my eyes and I can see myself on our couch in Saudi Arabia in tears saying, I have no purpose. What am I doing with my life? All I'm doing is following my husband around the world. This sucks. I've had those moments over the years, and 5 to 7 years, it took to shape my career. And I've gone at it of having my own business and doing contract part-time work. I have had this position that is unique and kind of funky with FSI that has no benefits. It's this WAE position. So, when I work, I get paid, but outside of that, I don't have any of the other benefits that come along with a more traditional job. And so, there's a loss there. And then over time, creating another business and this and that. and it's, you know, at this point in time, it's really nice to say, okay, it's working. And also, man, it took a lot. And I think that when I talk to other spouses or you know, EFMs who are trying to figure out what to do, I don't know if this is the right approach or not, but I say like, hey, it can be tough for a couple of years, and there's ways to make it less difficult, and that might be to take a full-time position that's more structured, and whether that's at the embassy or if you're able on the local economy, things like that. I think with post-COVID, it's actually opened up possibilities with remote work that's more possible now. But I don't know how that's answered the question at all, Susie, but those are some of the thoughts that just come bubbling up as I think about this journey. And I'm like, wow, yeah. So I'll just pause and let you take it from there.
Morgan, I think you've worked on the local economy certainly more than in the embassy.
I have. Yes. So let's see. We were in DC for a period, and I had built up actually what was like a pretty sizable client base for photography. And we were there 3.5 years. And like by my last year, I had like people emailing, like, we want you to do it every year and we want to do it anyway. And so it was like really rewarding. I mean, in the beginning, it was hard. And I certainly wasn't making enough to be like our sole income source, but like that was something that had always been a goal of mine, was to like actually make, I mean, and I had at different times in my life, I've made money, probably actually like aside from my current embassy job as a photographer has been my most income. Anyway, and then we moved for my spouse's job, and it was like super hard because everybody's like, oh, you can just like do it again. And I was like, oh, actually you can't, because it's nobody in their new place knows me, and nobody in our new place cares that I took good photos in Washington, DC. And at that point, I was kind of just like, I guess like I needed a break from rebuilding the same business. And so at that point, then I took a job with a local NGO that was like helping expats. And it was only part-time, but that was fine. We had a couple of small children, and it was really fun. It was actually, and this was something it was in like communications and advertising, which I had studied and felt confident about being a real, like actually being qualified for, as opposed to most of the embassy jobs I applied to. But yeah, the pay was terrible, but I was just like, I need to do something that I will love, because of sort of, I guess, the grief of having left this thing I had built. And anyway, so that was, and it was useful actually to work in an NGO, because then I saw like we were doing all these fundraisers and everything. And then I like actually realized that so much of the money we were fundraising just like went to pay us. And I was like, oh, this is actually really disheartening, because the organization isn't, I mean, it had a lot of good things about it, but it was like the big annual fundraiser really was just to keep us afloat. And I think that's, I guess I hear anecdotally that's true for a lot of NGOs. And I think you have to kind of understand that to then be like, okay, but it's worth it, right? Like I need to be paid. And yes, we have this like higher purpose, but like we do still need to make money to survive. And I had never worked really with NGOs before, so that was useful information, just for like experiential, like now in this side being in the government, like when I meet people who work at an NGO, I get kind of what they're going through, right? So it has been helpful to be on both sides of like looking for money, or I don't like give money, but part of my job here is to keep track of where USG money is. And anyway, so it's sort of almost like my career has been to orbit the embassy in a way, and like the government, and in DC to like actually see people, many of whom worked for the government in some form, but like not in their jobs at all, right? I was doing very much their personal experience there and with their babies and their children. And I think it isn't, let's see, what nobody wants to for that experience, but it has been a really useful thing just for me in terms of like lifetime of growth in understanding people and being better at maybe being patient with people or trying to understand where they came from. So I'm lucky, I guess, that we have always had enough that I don't feel like I have to get a full-time career job all the time, right? Like, and it's frankly impossible. So I think if anybody's listening who's new to the Foreign Service and you're feeling super guilty that you aren't contributing as much as your direct hire spouse, like, let go of that, because the system is built for you not to succeed at that. It is nigh impossible. So like, cut yourself some slack, understand that everything is stacked against you having a great, super rewarding full-time career from the get-go. It will take you, like Lisa said, years to build your own business. Sometimes when you do, then it collapses because you move. Like that, there aren't always those options. And if you can really, I don't know, I was always sort of my worst critic, like I should be doing something more and I should have more value, and this crying on the couch in Saudi Arabia. I mean, like, for sure, and even we're like 15 years in and I'm still right now like fighting back this emotional, like, why do I even matter? Like, again, I'm like the last person to be able to be settled anywhere we go, because my job is to make sure everybody else is okay when we move.
Yep.
And it's important, I think, that your spouse understand that. I have a good friend who, she is the direct, like in Hillary's position, right, where it's a heterosexual couple. The woman has the main employment, and her husband, they just moved, and she called me like, I don't know what to do, because he's like super depressed. He won't even leave the house, and like he's missing this opportunity to get to know everybody. And I was like, all he needs from you is like validation that you are so grateful he came with you to this new job, because like he will get out and meet other people, but that's not your job. Your job is to like validate that his coming with you is important to you, because otherwise there's no reason he came with you, right? Like everything else is, he could do anything else. Like you have to recognize as the employee that your spouse chose to come with you, and that like you can try to help them socially, but like the real value you add is by like telling them over and over, maybe ad nauseum, thank you for coming with me. I value you being here. I don't need you to make money right now. That kind of thing. I guess there are probably exceptions to this, but I do think generally that would be really helpful for a lot of EFMs.
I
My
agree
God, Morgan,
completely.
where were you like 4 years ago when I didn't know what to say to Juan?
Should I give out my number? And like,
Oh
I
my
can
God.
just tell everybody, like, if you're not sure what to say, call me. I'll give you a little pep
Yeah.
talk.
No, he needed to hear that so badly, and I was so like trying to keep him busy, and encouraging
Right.
him to search jobs, which was probably not what he wanted to hear. And there's that gender dynamic there too that had flip-flopped, right? Like he was, wait, I'm not the male breadwinner in the family, and I'm following my spouse, and his passport says spousal support aide. That is his title in our passports. So he took that not well, and he's also
No.
Latino. So there's a little bit of like his machismo really had to take a far back seat for doing this, and I was utterly grateful and incredibly scared to have it all on my shoulders this time, because my success before had been finding really great jobs where he took us, but this was the first time it flip-flopped and it was on me. So I also was scared shitless every day that he was going to be so unhappy, and the weight of his happiness just weighed on me so much. And so it was a really hard first year, even though he was finding consultancies and doing stuff. It's yeah, I wish you told me that sooner, Morgan. Thanks a lot.
Well, we didn't meet.
I think that's, I mean, just to triple on that, I have tried to communicate to my husband and then also other spouses, you know, if you all are in this position of being in the foreign service and moving, like the trailing spouse or whoever, they're committed, like, great, we're committed, we want to do this well, and it's also really hard. So just express appreciation. You don't have to apologize, you don't have to fix everything, but please make sure you express appreciation, because there are some sacrifices being made here. And I'm willing, we in general tend to be willing to do this, and it also is really hard. So remember to just express appreciation and like see us, right? Because so many of the times, like, we feel unseen.
And we land in countries where we have to figure out new shopping, new language, new driving, new all the things. If we have kids and we have to get them settled, and we don't have that community where the employee gets to go to work and they immediately start to meet people and connect with people, and like we have to go to these freaking coffees and the spouse lunches where everyone sits all and they play nicely, and it's just super awkward. And yeah, it's hard to be the trailer. It really is. Trailer, that makes me sound like I'm like I have a hitch on the front. you guys know what I mean. All right, let's do, we have about 10 more minutes. What about salaries? I know Hillary has a good salary story. So one quick salary story that I had for the job that I have now. I was hired from DC, but working here. It's called an EPAP position, and I was offered my salary at a qualification under what I actually have, and the woman told me that I should just be happy with what I was offered, and I thought, no. And I had a conversation with her, and she started to be like, well, then it doesn't really sound like you want this job. And I thought, well, I wanted to start to back down. And then I finally I wrote to the next person above her, and I just said, I just want to understand why I'm offered a salary below what my qualifications actually are for this particular job. And the next day I got another offer letter that had the correct salary in it. But it was just super interesting that this person who I was communicating with, who was also an EFM, just wasn't ready to step up. And I didn't want her to fight my battle for me, but I just wanted her to be straight with me. But it was just, as you were saying, Lisa, like that letter that it was really hard to hit send. Like, I just kept thinking, I shouldn't send this. I shouldn't send this. I should think about this. Let me rewrite it. Maybe I'm being too pushy. And it was just really hard to advocate for that, even though I knew 100% I was in the right. Yeah. Hillary, let's hear your salary story.
My salary negotiation, the first time I negotiated my salary, was by accident. I got my first job offer. I had interned at the UN for 6 months, and that parlayed into a job with them, which I was over the moon with. They could have offered me $5 and I would have taken it, save the cost of living in Geneva being what it was, and me needing to eat occasionally. And honestly, being very, very tired of the fact that, like, even though I was working, Juan was paying the lion's share of everything. And I had one of the few paid internships, but it was pennies in Geneva, more than sufficient anywhere else in the world, but not even a drop in the bucket there. And so salaries are paid monthly in Switzerland. And so they gave me my offer, and it was for some reason, the offer comes as a monthly package. It said, I was reading it and it said $5,000 a month. And I don't know what that says. I can't read it.
Just continue your story. You're good.
Anyway, so I
I first of all, I was flabbergasted. 5,000. I was just like, I don't even know what I'm going to do with all this money. I'm going to throw it all up in the air and jump around on a bed, and it's going to be amazing. And but I didn't know. I wasn't completely sure of the currency. And so I went into my boss's office and I was like, Bernd, I'd really thank you so much. I absolutely accept this offer. I'm super grateful for this opportunity. I just need to know, is this in US dollars or is this in Swiss francs? And he looks up at me and he's like, clever girl. All right, I'll do Swiss francs. And I was like, that was not, yes.
Nice.
Yes, you will do Swiss. And that was probably at the time, it was almost 1-to-1, but it amounted to about 5,500 a month instead of just 5,000 USD. And so, but it gave me this like, well, even if I did it accidentally, I can do this. I can totally do this. And I always watched Juan negotiate his salary, and I would watch him on the other end of the phone. I'd see the back and forth emails because he would often have me fix the English. And I was just like, dude, you can't do this. You can't ask for this. Men innately know their worth so much more than women. And they don't hesitate to ask for it. It's just like, this is the common market value, and this is what I'm going to ask for, and these statistics back it up, and I'm going to do it. Why women just feel grateful for any offer will be beyond me, and I'm guilty of it myself, obviously. But so I really took this to heart, and I think what rang true for me, at some point somebody showed me the statistics that if women don't negotiate for their salaries, your starting point could have been here. And you spend 10 years in that job and you get to here. But if you negotiate and your starting point is here, look how much farther you go in that same 10 years time. Look how much more successful you are, how much more money you earn, et cetera. And so that stuck with me. And that's really easy with our salary scales, pay grades, to really negotiate for the step increase. And so when I got my first job with USAID, I negotiated uncomfortably hard with them and gained a few steps, which then became my starting step, which was much higher than their base offer. When I came here, I did the same thing, and back and forth, so many uncomfortable emails. Juan encouraging me, holding me, like being like, you can do this. This is a good thing. And the guy on the other side being like, no, and back and forth. But it ended up working to my favor. But what happened along the line was a few friends of mine knew I'd negotiated hard in Bogota, and they came to me and they asked me for advice. Should I even negotiate? Was always the first question. Yes. Don't even ask that question. Absolutely. Even if you get one step more, look where you're starting from. And employers expect it. They're not going to say yes right away, but they absolutely expect it. So do it. Was always step one. And then I don't know how many people in Bogota I wrote their negotiation letters for them, the emails, because they were so uncomfortable doing it themselves. And then they got it, maybe they didn't get what they aimed for, but they got somewhere. And I've done it for 2 colleagues since coming here, both FSNs, who were really like, I can't do this. I don't want to do it. I'm not comfortable doing it. I'm like, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up for a disadvantage later in your career. Start as high as you can now and move from there. And so I just talked to one of those staff today who got, through our emails, which I was ghostwriting for her, 4-step increase from where she started. And she later told me that when she talked to the person she was negotiating with, they're like, I know that was really uncomfortable for you. I know that was hard, but I'm so glad you did it. Now, they can't say that in the original emails, right? HR and XO, because they're fighting to get the cheapest rate that they can. But on a personal level, this person was like, it's so great that you did that. Like, I'm going to do that with my next job. And so I think just keep bringing women along and showing them what men have always known to do, and do it with them and encourage them and show them an example of how it works, even if it was a total accident to start with.
I love it. I also think too, I mean, like there's all the statistics, and you mentioned it, Hillary, of women tend not to ask as much as men do and things like that. I also think too, like sometimes there's the culture in the organization, or who the person on the other side who expects the woman not to negotiate. Like Susie, your experience where you have a person on the other side saying, you should just be grateful for what you had. And in my mind, I'm like, I wonder how many men they tell that to. Like, I don't know. Maybe men hear that too, but it seems like it could also be tossed back to women like that, where it's like, well, just be thankful, you know? And so that cultural shift needs to happen, or we just need to keep being strong and pushing. And good for you for helping others do that as well, Hillary.
Yeah, good for you, Hillary. But also, I feel like, and not like, you know, we should all be women and link arms and sing kumbaya, but like we really should stick together and help lift one another up and
Yeah. Yes. Agree 100%.
push the
I think
envelope.
sometimes you need someone in your corner telling you like, yes, I did this, you can do this, we can all do this. Like, and I think sometimes people forget that if they're at the salary negotiation phase, you're their number one candidate. They want you. No one wants to go back and do interviews again. No one wants to repost and rehire and do any of that. That's always on your side. And we so quickly forget that when it gets to this point.
Yeah.
Morgan, any salary thoughts?
Oh, I will just say, I think it should just be a general practice to have somebody else write your salary negotiation stuff, because it's super easy to advocate for somebody else.
Yep.
And so we can just find a buddy and be like, I'll do yours, you do mine. And it's because you're less tied, and it's much easier for me to see, of course, all the great things about Susie and not myself, right? Like I can be like, but she does this and this and this, and you know, it's way easier. And so that's a great idea, Hillary. Everybody should implement it, or you should just write them all.
I think Hillary should write them all.
Happy to. I'm happy to.
Perfect.
Anything I can do to get that parity a little bit closer.
That's her side job. Well, since we're talking about salaries, and just a quick plug for the admin push that is FSFRC, so the Foreign Service Family Reserve Corps for State Department folks. Actually, and I think state USAID spouses qualify as well. It is a way to administratively ease your hiring at new posts, and you get to carry your security clearance with you. It facilitates the hiring process considerably. So it's just a plug there. They have open windows to apply throughout the year, and I think it's definitely something to look into. It's on the GCLO page, and they have all sorts of information. If you are at an embassy, a CLO should be able to tell you about it, or HR should be able to tell you about it. So FSFRC. We have about 4 minutes to wrap up. We didn't get to talk about all of the things that I wanted to talk about, so maybe that means we need to do a part 2 on employment. But any last thoughts, ladies, on employment overseas?
I'll just add this, and it links back to Morgan's experience with having a successful photography business in DC before she went overseas. There is a myth out there, and sometimes people hear, especially EFMs who are trying to start their own business, where it's like, oh, great, you're doing great here, just take it with you. Oh, you can just move that with you. It's incredibly challenging for so many different reasons, but moving to a new place really is like starting at ground level to build a business, and any business takes 2 to 3 years to kind of really get that foundation and build those relationships. And in our world, that's when we move and we start over again. And I did that twice and then got totally worn out. And I was like, I will either work virtually or I will travel because this is so emotionally draining. And the other complicating factor linking to the salaries is salary basis, what organizations and companies pay is so drastically different in different parts of the world that it is very challenging to try to, from that perspective of having your own business and trying to relocate around the world, there's just a lot of challenges there. And it's quite easy for people to look in from the outside and be like, oh, just do this. And oh, you could just take it with you. There's much more to that than initially meets the eye.
Yeah, it is. a portable career it's challenging unless you have like a clientele and a set base. If you're trying to work in your new community, why would your new community reach out to you? They don't know who you are.
Yeah.
It is kind of frustrating. Hillary, Morgan, last thoughts?
No, I was just thinking, I mean, you guys have all had very similar experiences arriving at new missions. What do you do when you see another woman arrive in the same position? Like, what is the EFM trailing spouse woman to woman support network like? Does such a thing exist? Is there anything that you guys actively do to try to find I don't know, find other women who struggled the exact same way that you did upon arrival? Like, what can we all do better?
Really big question.
Yeah, it's just
it's
a
a great
tiny one
question.
to end. Sorry.
In this last 30 seconds, I would say don't like sports. That a good way to start meeting people is some sort of sport thing. If there's pickleball or like volleyball or a yoga class or something, because it's very, especially daytime ones, if you don't have a job yet, like you can go and yes, you might run into the people that like just do that permanently, but it's also there are people that's sort of like where you go to find other people who aren't at a job during the day. And you can kind of quickly, with very low pressure, you're not like on a date, you're like both playing tennis. So then you're like, oh, you know what, tennis isn't for me. And you don't have to keep in touch with a person that might have not been a great match. Anyway, I mean, I think it's weird because we end up dating friends all the time when we move. And so it's like you have to kind of try it out. And I try to also tell people like it's cool, like let me introduce you to people, because you and I might not be a match, but like I might know who's gonna be your best friend here. So to try to really keep it like very low intensity in the beginning with new people, and just like try to plug them in and be like, who do you need, and let's help you find them, because that's kind of an early thing. It's if you don't get to find the people that would have helped you for a while, then you're like low of I'm starting over lasts longer.
I think it's
Lisa,
the
Susie, I don't know.
value
That's key.
of having conversations like this too, and sharing stories and pieces of our own journey. That has really been helpful for me to not feel alone, because I can feel like I'm the only one struggling. Everybody else has found their connection points. And then as other people are willing to share their stories and say, hey, you know, like I'm struggling with this, or I'm feeling disconnected, or I was, and this is what I did. It's really helpful. And that's partly why I think these conversations and sharing can be beneficial.
I mean, I think it's so important for both of those things, because that feeling of loneliness and like isolation is really what hits people. And even if they've moved like 5 or 6 times, it can be really easy to just kind of get entrenched in your house, in your home, and your immediate family, rather than trying to connect out. And so just trying to break that mold, as Morgan says, plug them into places and help them connect with people, have those conversations, understand that there are, you know, maybe they won't have their favorite yoga person that they had at their last post, and maybe their grocery store here is weird and different, and the checkers are like super hurried and rude, or whatever it is. It's like, but there are still many good things about where they are now. So just helping them to see that, I think, is really important.
And to link it to the jobs and the employment, it's often through our network that we find opportunities. And so I think for me, pushing myself, especially at the beginning, inviting others to connect, meet lots of people, you know, like Morgan said, get out there, do the quote unquote dating thing of potential friends and acquaintances and whoever, because it can actually open doors for employment opportunities as well.
Ladies, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. I mean, we talked mostly about employment. I'm very good and on task for that. So proud of us. I am 100% certain we'll have a third podcast with 4 FS women talking. We'll just have to come up with the topic that we can stick to for an hour.
Yes.
Thank you again for joining, and thanks for listening. And we'll be back.
Thank you, Susie.
Thanks, Susie and ladies.